Today, desalination is often cited as one of the key technologies that can help to tackle global water scarcity challenges, but it's by no means the only one. While desalination can help to provide new supplies of fresh water, it's also vital that we find new ways to use our existing water supplies more efficiently. The wastewater treatment industry has developed significantly in recent years and can form part of the solution. We recently caught up with Carlos Cosin, CEO of Almar Water Solutions and President of the International Desalination Association, to discuss the possibilities. So, Carlos, at the moment the water industry seems to be focused on desalination, but wastewater reuse is growing in popularity. Where do you see this going in the future?
Okay, yeah, you're right. I think desalination has been growing up 10% every single year, and now for me it's a commodity that really has to solve in areas with scarcity close to the areas, the drinking water. Okay, for me it's something that we have been working the last 20, 30 years, but now I'm not concerned about. But the other part that you mentioned is quite important. The reuse is a reality, and Singapore and California hasn't demonstrated that when you have a political will, has been done. Okay, Singapore is reusing 85% of his water for the industry.
Water reuse has become an increasingly important part of water resources management around the world. The global contracted reuse capacity has almost doubled since 2010, with cumulative contracted capacity increasing from 59.7 million cubic meters per day 2009 to 118 million cubic meters per day in 2017.
Then this is the reality. If you see the global rate is no more than 4% of the total water is reused globally. Then it's a huge gap between 4% and these cases, okay? Then the reuse trend came from California, when they suffered in the 70s a very deep scarcity, okay? And by law, they regulated in which manner they can do it, okay? Okay, reuse can be used. It's true that the technology provide an efficient solution and healthy. You can drink this water, okay? By the atmosphere for the citizens to drink water from the waste, I think is so difficult to digest. And then they create a regulation that you can inject in the aquifers, healthy, and after that you can treat it again and drink it. This is the California model. And they create his own regulations that now I'm trying to expand any other areas, okay? It's very difficult. In Europe, for instance, we have a big fight between northern countries and southern countries. Northern countries, they have no lack of resources, and then for them the reuse is nothing important. But for Europe, for the southern countries, Spain, Italy, Greece, it's critical. In Spain, we are in the level of 10 to 12% increasing, with some areas as Murcia in the Mediterranean that is now increasing 25%, or the Canary Islands. And we are starting to increase our radius. But in any other areas, even they don't know exactly what is the technology to use it, okay? Then for me, is clearly we have to reach that the majority of the industrial water has to be reused. There is not any reason that do not allow to do it. Okay? And for agricultural purposes, so that we have to implement a new regulation, because this water in contact with tomatoes is different if this is a tree, that is the water is not in contact. That we are working in a regulation, but the problem is that each country and each area is working his own regulation. We need a global framework, okay? And I think this is the era. This is the next 10 years probably. This is the most challenges for the water sector, okay? Because it has two impacts. First, reduce the pollution by treating, and second, reduce the fresh water consumption for applications that can be reused.
So, who is going to make that regulation? Is that something that comes from the trade bodies like the International Desalination Association? Or does it come from supranational governmental bodies like the EU or the United Nations? Where is such global regulation going to come from?
There is some advice from the multilateral organizations, okay? National Unions or Bank, okay? But at the end, each country has to regulate it.
Spain has led the European wastewater reuse market since 2010, with large projects aimed at agricultural uses in that country. However, a proposed EU directive that would require treatment of microbiological pathogens to facilitate water reuse for agricultural irrigation has the potential to increase water reuse in the EU from 3 million cubic meters per day to 18 million cubic meters per day.
In Spain we regulate, but we transpose the European Union directive. And then I know that during these years, and I was working many years in the European Commission to have a more clear regulation, and has to be adapted for the real needs in these other countries, okay? But Singapore has its own regulation, it's working pretty well. California has its own regulation, the Title 22 of California, okay, which is very deep, very extensive, and very accurate, okay? Then different crops needs different quality of the water, different treatments, okay? And depending on the quality you can reach, you have a different technologies. And it's huge. Then I think that the rest of the countries has to follow this Title 22 from California, and Singapore is already done. Oman is doing a pretty good job, okay? Saudi is now putting in the new horizon that in the next, I think 10 years, we have to reach the reuse in a gap of, I don't know exactly, I remember the mic, but...
As the contracted capacity continues to rise, the epicenter of the global wastewater reuse market has shifted from North America to Asia, with China accounting for 49% of capacity contracted between 2010 and 2017. However, new capacity in India and Taiwan is also significant. India is now the fastest growing market in the region, with new environmental legislation as one of the drivers.
We are starting to put pressure and let's go to see, okay? But it's true that we start 20 years ago simultaneously with reuse and desalination, and the reality, the sal is now reaching the targets that we have. Reuse is very, very delaying his plannings to incorporate and to implement it.
So, accepting that there is much work still to do, where are we today globally in terms of reuse?
I think we are in the range of 104 million cubic meters a day in desal and similar figures in reuse, okay? But the curiosity is that desal is growing in a stable way, 10%, 5%, 7%. Reuse is from nothing, and from the last 2 years, boom, is from the scratch, growing faster, probably 20% rates or something like that, okay? Which is good because at the end, the needs are more in reuse, and if the growth is higher, okay, the expectations to implement it will be much better. No? I think I mentioned the sustainable targets from the United Nations, because it's very important, the climate change, which is not something from now, it's something that came from many years, but we are realizing that the problem has to be solved.